Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today. Today I'm going to teach you how to make stuffed pork loin. This is a delicious dish, pretty simple to make, and here are the ingredients. So you have one pork loin, some breadcrumbs, about a cup, about a half cup of fresh herbs, or you could use dry herbs. And then after I have some of these sweet chili peppers. Usually you can find these in Italian delicatessens or your local supermarket. They're not that hot at all. It's more of a sweet vinegary flavor that just goes so good with the pork. Pork loin is just a great value. It's the same cut of meat as filet mignon, but it's, much, much cheaper, maybe a third of the price. There's almost no trimming involved with it because it already comes trimmed up really nice. So you don't have to spend a lot of time cutting off, fat or what they call silver skin off of it. So pretty easy to use. So here we go. It's gonna be a delicious dish. Now we're gonna chop up the fresh herbs for the stuffing. Stick with me because the way I stuff this pork loin is kind of unique. I'm gonna use a thin knife and bore a little hole down the center of it, and then use my sharpening steel to kind of just plunge through and make a little cavity, almost like a little tunnel through that small pork loin to push all the stuffing into it. After I chop up these herbs, I'm going to heat up about 2 tablespoons of olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, and let these steep in there. So I'll just bring the olive oil up to a low heat just so it gets hot. So when you put these in, you should hear a little bit of a sizzle, but then right away you just turn the heat off and let them just steep in that oil to pull out the flavors. Could add in a pinch of salt also to help pull out the flavors. It smells so good. You want the chili peppers to be diced up pretty fine. When you're slicing the pork loin, when it's done, if it's big chunks, it'll want to pull at the stuffing and make it fall apart. So the finer you have it, the easier it'll be to slice up your pork loin and not have the stuffing fall apart. So this could go right into the breadcrumbs. All right, the next step in the process is to bore a hole into this pork tenderloin. You kind of want to have a feel for, where the top is, where the bottom is, and we're just trying to stab a hole through the whole thing without hopefully jabbing your finger. So the blade is down, the sharp end of the knife. That way I could feel kind of on top and just kind of guide it through and just gently feel on the bottom. You can kind of turn the blade in circles a little bit, but basically you're just trying to go straight through it. There's not much resistance to this, so it's more of just take your time, use a flat surface because then it's easier to judge that the knife isn't going through the bottom of it or one of the sides. And you can see that is just going to go about halfway. So I will come in through the other side and do the same thing. And again, kind of turn your knife in a few different, in a circle in a few different directions to really try to make a nice cavity through that whole thing. Okay, now there should be a little hole through the whole thing. The next part is to stab the sharpening steel right through the middle of it and just let it bore a little hole through the whole pork loin. Kind of make sure it's not coming out the bottom. If there's a little tear on it, it's not the end of the world. You don't want a big tear, but you want to catch it early. So take your time, look through both sides or look around it to be sure it's not tearing through any section. I could feel it. It's about right there for that last half inch, and there it is there coming through the other side. Like that. So now there is a hole going through that whole pork loin. This stuffing has the extra virgin olive oil, the herbs, the sweet chilies. I'm going to put in a pinch of salt. Now in this pork loin there was the 2 tablespoons of olive oil, breadcrumbs, the sweet chili peppers, the herbs, a pinch of salt. I put about 2 tablespoons of water just to give it more of a kind of a mashed potato consistency so it goes through the bag easier. You don't need to use a pastry bag, it makes it a little easier. You can just, with a small spoon, kind of feed it into that hole. But when you use a pastry bag, it's good to fold over the ends quite a bit over your hand. It's almost covering my entire hand. It just makes it a lot easier to fill the bag. All right, there you go. The tip's not cut off of this yet. You want to twist the top of it, and then the bottom, you want to probably be a little bigger than the hole you bored into the pork loin. So you probably want about a half-inch hole on the bottom. If that makes sense. If it's too small, it'll be too difficult to squeeze the pork mixture through it. And keep on twisting, you really want to, the pressure you're putting is on the back of the bag. See how it's feeding through a little bit? It's fairly dry. Probably could have put a little more olive oil or a little bit of water, but I'll still get it to work. Now feed it in there, and you could use your steel to push it in further. Again, as you squeeze out the stuffing, keep on tightening up the bag, and again, squeeze the top of the bag, kind of propel the stuffing towards the tip. And now I'm going to feed it through the other side also. Again, kind of help it out a bit. As it comes out of the bag, use your finger to shove it into the pork loin. You can tell it's not really in the center yet too well, so I'll use this to try to push the stuffing into the middle. Okay, I developed a little bit of a hole there, no big deal. I'll just work on this side a little more. I'm not going to mess with that other side because I don't want to make that hole any bigger. So that's pretty good. I can tell it's filling up in there. Really use your finger to push that stuffing through. Okay, our pork loin is stuffed. Next, I'm going to brown it on a saute pan over high heat. It's called a Maillaird reaction. So caramelization is when you bring sugar above 350 and you start to brown sugar and starches. Proteins, it's called a Maillaird reaction, and it's around 200 something degrees. I'll have to look it up, I'll put it on the video. But that's when you start to get the browning of protein. And I highly recommend that if this is something you don't do a lot, get a meat thermometer. They're so easy to use nowadays. This one's from Amazon, super accurate. And all meat, when you think of protein, what is it to cook meat? You're basically denaturing the protein with heat. So each protein is this complex molecule, almost like origami that folds in amongst itself. And proteins, all proteins denature between about 140 to 165. So that is what cooking is. The heat is denaturing, it is making that protein into a different shape. That's the same reason why cooking things to like 160 degrees, why it kills off bacteria. The proteins in the bacteria, they denature and therefore they cannot function. All meats are at that range. All egg dishes cook to about that range. So when you cook a custard, that custard's going to be about 150 to 155 degrees. So if you know that temperature, about 150 to 160, that is when things are cooked. And not only does heat denature, the other way people know the dish ceviche, where they make this, they take raw fish and they sprinkle lime juice all over it and they let it sit for a few days. Well, that is actually cooked too because the acid is denaturing the protein of the fish, and it is cooked. That fish no longer, those proteins are no longer in their original shape. So I say that because when using this, sometimes, especially when something's stuffed or thicker, it's hard to tell how well it's done in the middle. And with this thermometer, we want to jam it right through the middle. We want it to be at least at 150 to at the most about 160. So in that range is what you want to get to. So whether it's turkey, pork, it's all going to be in those ranges. Rare meats are more like at the 145 temperature range, but you can look up all those temperatures. But all proteins are the same. So get a thermometer. It's one of the best tools you could have in your kitchen. Okay, I have a very hot pan. You can see this pan is just jumping up in temperature. 200, it's just going to keep on climbing. Basically, you want the pan to be very hot because that pork loin, I already pulled it out of the refrigerator an hour ago. So it's closer to room temperature, and that's important anytime you have thicker pieces of meat. It just makes it cook much more evenly. And the reason you want a pan really hot is because that pork loin, it's going to suck up all the heat from the pan, and you really want it to get that Maillard reaction where it's browning. That adds a lot to flavor. And after I brown it, that's just going to be to brown the outside. It also looks very appealing. Then I'm going to put it in a 400 degree oven for about 15 minutes. Pork loins don't take too long to cook. So a little bit of olive oil. This pork loin's barely going to fit in this pan. Now I'm turning the temperature all the way to high. And again, most home stovetops don't have that many BTUs like restaurants, so it's important to preheat your pans to get them hot because it just adds a lot of flavor to get those high temperature reactions. So you can see that's browned up very nicely. You want to make sure it's brown around the entire pork tenderloin. I did season this with salt and pepper also before I sauteed it, so it's very important to season outside of salt and pepper. That looks really good, so now it's going to go in an oven for about 15 minutes. Okay, this has been going for about 9 minutes. I'm just going to check to see how it's progressing. We'll put the meat thermometer right through the center cavity, because that is the area we want to get to about at least 150. Stab it in the thinner area, and there it is already at 160. So that is the loveliness of cooking. You know, it's not always uniform pieces of meat. Over here it is, this area is 153, 120. So it's getting close. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this section with a little piece of foil to try to keep the heat off this area since it's just about done, and let this area keep on cooking. I will also rotate the pan because this side might be the hotter area of the oven. Sometimes these ovens aren't uniform in their dispersion of heat. The foil I'll keep over that half of the pork tenderloin that was already really close to being done. All right, our pork tenderloin is done. It's been resting for about 10 minutes. I will slice it up now. This over here. Slice up at a slight angle. Again, let your knife do the work for you. And almost try to hold that pork together so the stuffing stays intact. Go through the whole dish. Look how beautiful that is. Let's put that right on our plate. Pretty simple, nice meal for maybe like 3 to 4 people. And again, see, when you're slicing through, the stuffing almost wants to pop out, so be very gentle with your knife. You want a nice thin knife like this. Just let the knife do the work, especially when you get towards the bottom. Let it slice through the whole thing. All right, it's all done. Pork tenderloin stuffed with a bread stuffing, served with some spaghetti squash. I'll show you how to make this on my next video. Great presentation, great thing to do for your friends and family. Again, thanks for joining me on Just Cook with Michael. Now go out and cook for someone you love.